let's have a listen first with Comet and wider turned off. And then I'll turn it on. Hey, what's going on? In this video, I'm going to show you how to place your instruments into surreal spaces that aren't possible in the real world using a combination of wider and Comet. So let's check it out. So I have this pad, and without any processing on it, it's just dead center mono. There's no stereo image at all. So let's have a quick listen to that. Okay, so I'm going to use a combination of wider and Comet to make this move in and out of just a crazy stereo image. So we're going to bring up not only the X axis, but also the Z axis with some reverb from Comet. So I'm going to turn on wider, turn on Comet, and I'm going to hit this disclosure triangle and this disclosure triangle so that I can see the different parameters that I can automate. Next, I'm going to right click and show automation on the amount for wider, and I'll put that into its own automation lane. And then I'm also going to right click and show automation on the dry wet of Comet. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to automate wider to go all the way wide while the dry wet of Comet is at 0, and then invert them so that when Comet is 100% wet and it's fully reverberated, we get this back and forth between wider and Comet. So we get this really dry, super wide stereo image with wider, and then a wet, little more lush, natural stereo image from Comet when wider goes back down to 0. Now, that's a lot of talking, so let's just take a look and I'll show you what I mean. So let's pull up wider and just take a listen to what it sounds like when I boost this all the way up. So let's start at 0. So you can hear it has a drastic effect on the stereo image of the sound. Now, I have wider back at 0. Let's open up Comet. Let's make space for both of these to exist together. Okay, and now I have wider at 0. Let's push up Comet and take a listen to what this sounds like. Okay, so that's a little more of a natural stereo space, and it's got that Z dimension, which we're used to hearing in the real world. So let's go ahead and invert the automation between the two, like so. I'm going to hide these windows. And I've got Comet dry wet here in this automation lane and wider amount here in this automation lane. So I'll make my grid just a little bit bigger. Actually, let's settle right about here. So let's put wider all the way up, and then we'll have it slowly ramp back down to 0. And as it ramps down to 0, we'll have Comet, oops, let's undo this, Comet ramp up to 100. So it's going to go like this. Okay, and maybe we'll leave it up for that much. And now let's just duplicate this envelope a few times. And I'll open up the plugins so that you could take a look at what they're doing. So when wider is at 200%, fully wide, Comet's going to be at 0, and vice versa. So let's have a listen. Already that's starting to sound a lot more interesting. So I think I might fine tune this a little bit, have the Comet dry wet ramp back down to 0 instead of abruptly going back down to 0. So right here, perhaps I will move this breakpoint over to there, move this breakpoint over to there, and now let's duplicate this envelope like so, and let's have a listen. Ooh, I love that. And this is most obvious if you're listening with headphones or speakers. If you're listening on your phone or your laptop, you'll probably hear some differences, but this is really for when you're experiencing music through speakers or in your car or with headphones. So definitely recommend listening with that. So let's unsolo the pad and check it out in the context of the mix. I love that. It sounds really cool. So let's put one last little bit of automation in here for the icing on the cake. I'm going to right click on the size of Comet and I'm going to say show automation. Actually, let's make a new lane for it. So let's right click on the size, show automation. And now I'm just going to subtly have the size move up and down. And I'm just kind of arbitrarily moving this around. Note that you're really only going to hear a difference when the Comet, which is the dry wet automation lane right here, is up. When it's at 0, we're not really going to hear what's going on there. So I'm really making some movement when the dry wet of Comet is up. So let's make just a couple more points, and now I'll duplicate that envelope. And let's pull up Comet, pull up wider. And so now we've got the wider amount going up and down. The size is ever so slightly fluctuating with Comet, and the dry wet of Comet going all the way up and all the way down. So let's solo it and have a listen, and then check it in context of the mix. Very cool. So just for comparison purposes, let's bypass wider and Comet and then bring them back in so we can really hear what's going on here. So I'm going to group these together. I'm going to turn them off. Let's solo the pad. And again, if you're listening with headphones or speakers, you should really be able to hear the difference of when this effect chain with the automation is on versus when it's off. So let's have a listen first with Comet and wider turned off, and then I'll turn it on. Cool. Now let's do that same thing in the context of the whole mix. So I'll unsolo this. We'll start with this off, and then I'll turn it on as it's playing. Obviously, you could do this with all types of instruments. This is just one example. It also sounds really cool on vocal layers, ARPs, different synth leads, percussion. I mean, you could even do this on drums. And I encourage you to experiment and try it out. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please give a like and subscribe, and look out for more videos coming very soon. Okay, until next time.